This time around, we're looking at the BRICS introducing cryptocurrency or trying to introduce cryptocurrency as a way to de-dollarize the global economy. What would be the outcome of it? Would it gain global acceptance? This as some of the issues we'll be talking with a guest who will be joining us virtually is Segun Sopitan, and he will be speaking to the issues. But before we bring in Segun Sopitan, who is a principal partner at Woodbridge and court consultant, Femi and I have been talking about the possibility of cryptocurrency replacing actually the dollar. Is it even possible to replace the dollar? In my thinking, I'm not sure that's very possible. But to the question of the cryptocurrency replacing the dollar, which cryptocurrency would it be? You have different types of it. Which one will be adopted? Is it going to be the Bitcoin? And how many persons? Okay, if it's talk about international trade, of course, countries may be able to adopt that, but it seemed like it's going to be an expensive trade because you know how much one Bitcoin trades to now the dollar.
Well, it's important to know that the discussion is still ongoing among the BRICS nation, and I think before that is being arrived at, the framework for this kind of implementation will have been put in place. The peculiarity of the cryptocurrency to adopt will also come into discussion because there are different types. And I think the most important thing is to achieve the aim of providing an alternative to the US dollar. Because you must understand that in the global economy, every nation is seeking to be relevant. And for these nations to be relevant, they are also thinking that they need to have control over their currencies, which is going to start from the founding members, also extended to members of the BRICS nation, whereby they prioritize cryptocurrencies as against the US dollar. But let's see what Segun Sopitan will have to say as regards this development. We're glad to have you join us, Segun Sopitan. How are you doing today?
Good morning, madam.
Glad to see you. It's been a while.
It has. It's a
Been
pleasure.
busy. So, good to see you again. So let's have the discussion. We're talking about efforts being made by BRICS nations to see how to de-dollarize the global economy by replacing US dollar with cryptocurrencies. What's your reaction to this?
I find it interesting, and I think that my general disposition towards it as well. You know, change is an inevitable part of life, of the human experience, and you know, in different times of human history, you find that empires rise and empires fall, currencies rise and currencies fall. So you know, what we're seeing now is just another chapter, if you like, in the history of humanity, where as a result of an interplay of a varying number of factors, there is a deliberate push from certain quarters to reduce the prominence and the dominance of the US dollar and the US economy as a whole. You know, so I think it's important that we put that context, that overriding context of just the human experience, the fact that change will always come and something will trigger it. It's also important to note that this is politics. It's very important to know that this is just pure global politics, you know, at the highest level of it. And we're basically seeing another chapter, if you like, of the Cold War between the East and the West. You know, this contending, almost eternal contending of ideologies. You know, so the Western ideology and the Eastern ideology. And the East, when you say the East, you usually refer to countries in Asia and Russia. So you have Russia, you've got China, you've got India, and then those three forces, especially Russia and China. India tends to be a bit centrist and tries to be non-aligned in a number of ways, but you know, they tend to join forces with the Eastern forces when it's convenient for them. And then you see these three leading global powers who are contending with the United States and the other Western powers, are then trying to find accomplices, if you like, allies, you know, across the world, especially the developing world, where it's like, you know, there's a lot of room for expansion by them and by their ideologies. So what we're seeing playing out now is simply a battle for dominance between the East and the West. And South Africa has aligned themselves with these Asian forces. Brazil has also done so as a result of the leadership that they currently have. And then you have a number of other countries who see an opportunity to benefit from the war, the Cold War, if you like, between the US dollar and these other countries. So I think that's a wider context within which to place all of this. If you want to come down to the specifics with regards to what's possible and what's not possible, how long it's going to take, it's a very, very interesting and deep conversation regarding, and then now narrowing it down to the attempt to use cryptocurrency for international trade. Generally speaking, before we go into the details, I think that it's going to be an uphill battle. It's not something that they're going to achieve easily, if ever at all, for a number of reasons, which I'm sure we'll go into. But those are my general, opening thoughts.
All right, looking at the different approach that have been tried by the BRICS. First, it was trying to launch a BRIC currency, and then the gold-backed currency as well. They've also now looked at cryptocurrency. Now, why do you think the plan to have a common currency for BRIC nations hasn't worked? Even that of the gold-backed currency hasn't worked, and then they're looking at cryptocurrency. Why take a look at crypto to replace the dollar instead of a common currency for the BRICS nation or even gold?
I think the key thing to note, especially with the issue of common currencies, is that before you can talk about a common currency amongst nations, there have got to be a number of commonalities that must be fulfilled. Otherwise, the currency just simply will not work. And I guess that in fact, I'm surprised that they even thought about it at all, because one of the biggest impediments to the launching of a common currency is obviously their geographical disparity. I mean, one BRICS country is in South America, another one is in Southern Africa, another one is in Far Eastern Asia, and another one, I mean, they're just simply too geographically dispersed for them to be able to say they are running a common currency. And then when you talk about the common currency, are you talking about a common currency for trade and exchange, or are you talking about common currency to be accepted and used as legal tender in their different local territories? So it's a very complex thing. Before you then now you move away from the geographical disparity, the distances between themselves, and then come down to all of the convergences that must happen before you can talk about having one currency that you are all trading with. You must have a convergence on macroeconomic factors. You must have a convergence on fiscal policies and fiscal factors. You must have a convergence on monetary policy and monetary factors. To achieve that convergence across such a widely disparate number of nations who are so widely separated by just distance, physical distance, it's almost impossible. And so I'm surprised that they even thought about it in the first place, because these things are just basic monetary economic theories, so they shouldn't have gone down that road. And then talking about the gold backed currency, if you like, I think that for me was probably a better way to go if you really want to de-dollarize, because what that will then mean is that you are strengthening your local currency by investing heavily in gold. The more gold that you then have, the more convertible your currency can be, the easier it will be for other territories and other countries to accept, your own currency, because you have gold to exchange for it if the need arises. We have to understand, the concept of reserve currency is, that currency that your own currency is sitting upon, that props it up, such that if there is any crisis, you can dip into that reserve and deal with the crisis. So if that currency is not the US dollar, it could be gold, so, and I'm sure that they've not really abandoned that. But, for that to work, there are a number of other considerations: inter-exchangeability, platform issues between the local currencies, and all of that will then come into play. So it's not just as simple as going with gold. The third issue now, which is the next frontier that they're exploring, is the issue of crypto, you know. And I think that crypto may very well be the solution to them, but it's going to be a long, long, rough ride. Because, and I say this because cryptocurrency itself, as a medium of exchange, whether locally or globally, is still in its infancy. You know, we're talking about, you know, you coming on with a new currency type, digital currency, that is going to be contending and competing with currencies that have been in existence for centuries. You know, so it's not going to be an easy ride. The truth of the matter is that humanity as a whole, at present, do not even understand crypto. We don't understand blockchain. We don't understand cryptocurrencies properly yet. Majority of the people listening to this are probably even hearing crypto maybe for the first time. They don't even understand the connection between cryptocurrency and blockchain technology. Countries are contending with this lack of understanding. It's still confusing for a lot of countries. And you find that across the world, new legislation is only beginning to be developed to try and regulate, you know, activities with crypto. And you've seen recently what has happened in Nigeria, where as a result of some policies of government, crypto got the blame. and there was a lot of crackdown on cryptocurrency operators in Nigeria. And that wasn't peculiar to Nigeria. It's happened in Europe, it's happened in the Americas, it's happened in Asia. And you find that a lot of countries are now beginning to see, oh, okay, there's really no harm in going the crypto way, but it has to be regulated because cryptocurrencies based on blockchain technology offers too much anonymity, you know, for transactions. And that is a challenge that regulators need to fix. If we're able to grapple with the challenges that come inherent with the use of cryptocurrency for regular fiat, as regular fiat currency, then we can begin to talk about its adoption for international trade. So I think it's premature. However, having said that, because for that very reason of it being a new standard, a new way of doing things in the world, there's also an opportunity to hop on it, ride it, and overcome the challenges that you probably have had if you are going, you know, in any of the other ways. For example, it will be far easier for BRICS to develop a
we seem to have lost connection with Segun. He's trying to talk about the impact of adopting cryptocurrencies and the challenges that are going to come out of it. Because like he said, it's also, if you especially look at Nigeria, Africa, it's at the infancy stage. I learned Segun is back with us.
Yes,
Segun,
I was hearing you. Yes, I can hear you.
all right.
Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Okay. So I was saying that, you know, so that lack of understanding and the newness of cryptocurrency as a means of exchange for financial transactions in the world may very well be, you know, an opportunity for the BRICS countries. And maybe that's why they're going in that direction, because for the very reason that it's new also means that how it's used can be defined. You are the pioneer. So, you know, what's to stop you? Whatever you decide you want to do, you very well can do. But it's not something that is going to happen anytime soon. You know, so there's a lot of ground to be covered with regulation. There's a lot of ground to be covered with legislation locally. But, you know, we have to remember this, that we're talking of several countries. So the local environment, the local legislative environment, the local regulatory environment, the local platform systems, payment systems environment that would adopt crypto needs to be resolved before you can then scale that up, determine standards of exchange, determine standards of information flow and exchange protocols, you know, from the technology point of view, pipelines and channels where these transactions are going to happen, before you can then begin to develop all of that. So, you know, just thinking about it, you realize that it's a lot of work to be done if this is ever going to happen. And my suspicion is because of the political intrigues that tend to also go along with this, it probably will never happen. You know, the type of unity of purpose that you require to develop these things, I suspect will repeatedly get interrupted by divergence of interests, amongst the participating countries. So for example, South Africa is neither east nor west. They simply flow in the direction where their interests best align. And I think I can say the same thing about India to a certain degree, and Brazil in particular. So, the moment you find that your interests are no longer converging, the likelihood is that your level of commitment to that ideal will probably drop, and you drop the ball and the thing will fail. So I think that it's a lofty dream. It has its interesting elements, for us as watchers of the financial space. But I strongly don't think that much is going to come out of this. In fact, I think the entire BRICS experiment will probably not work. The dollar is simply too dominant. It's simply too entrenched. If you look at the transaction volumes on global trade and global transaction flows, the dollar is doing 90, the lowest I've seen in all of my research, the dollar being the other side transaction to any currency, across the world. The lowest I've seen is about 88%. A lot of countries are doing transactions in dollars, even though they're not trading with the United States. So you have a China, for example, that is, it's total trade between China and the United States about 17 to 20%. But their total dollar transactions for 2022 was trending around 70%. The same for Japan, the same for even Russia, who is really the one driving this as a result of their, conflicts with the United States and their allies. So it's a battle. It's an uphill battle. The only thing I think one can say, about this in terms of the chances of success is that, look, after all, the dollar wasn't always the most dominant currency in the world. It rose, on the back of the world wars that was fought in the last century, and other currencies will come up. So maybe we're seeing the beginning of the decline of the dollar. My suspicion, it might take another 100 years, maybe 50, between 50 to 100 years, before we can begin to talk of a real threat to the dollar. It's simply too entrenched. So I think these guys have got a lot of work cut out for them. They've got to be very determined, they've got to be focused, and they've got to keep at it. They've got to keep going at it, and then continue to chip at the dominance of the dollar over the years until they achieve some measure of de-dollarization that they're pursuing. Is crypto the answer? I think the answer is blowing in the wind. It's a long journey, and I really don't think that will solve the problem at the moment.
Talking about the BRICS nations, you're talking about an economic bloc that has a population of about 3.5 billion people. And if you look at the contribution to the GDP, it's quite huge. If this move to replace the US dollar is something to go by, what might likely be the impact of these on the US dollar itself and also global trade?
Very interesting question. So what analysts are saying, and the realization is, because the dollar is used for international trade, there's a lot of demand for it all over the world, and that has an impact of buoying its value up and supporting the United States economy. And in fact, some people will say that the United States ships out its inflation to the rest of the world by simply getting the United States dollar to become a currency that everybody is trading in. So there is always demand for the dollar, such that the United States may not necessarily have significant money supply issues in their local economy. If this push for the dollarization works and impacts the demand for the dollar significantly, that could really hurt the United States as a country and their economy. So, for example, if you find that there is less demand for the dollars because a lot of countries are trading in other currencies, then what would happen is that all of that demand will shift back home. Then you would have a far larger, the United States economy is probably, I think the last time I checked, about 5% of total global economy, which is huge. They have a population that is just roughly less than, I think, 2% of global. There are about 300 million of them to 8 billion people in the world. So the impact of all of that demand, all of that activity that currently happens in the dollar around the world, moving back home, can actually destroy the United States economy. You could have a situation where hyperinflation develops in the United States. Prices of goods and services would skyrocket. There will be serious job losses, and all of that, and which will then force the hands of the United States monetary authorities to hike interest rates, which will then temper growth and throw them into a tailspin of recession, maybe even a depression. But that is painting a very extreme picture of what could happen. The likelihood and the truth is that it's extremely unlikely that we'll ever see such a scenario. But if it does happen, then the United States is at risk. So you can see that it's a really an existential battle, if you like, for the United States in particular, against people that are threatening their very existence. So it's a serious issue. I think it's also important to point out that in order for this to work, this de-dollarization effort, you find that there are a number of things that has to happen. Let's cast our minds back to Nigeria under President Muhammad Buhari. You'll remember that we had this swap deal with China, where we wanted to actually exchange for goods and services, trade goods and services in our local currencies. So Nigerians that are buying things from China will pay in Naira, and Chinese, bringing things in from Naira will pay in renminbi, and the Chinese people buying never really quite worked. And the reason for this is, the challenge of having a third party international trade is really large. You have to talk about payment systems. You have to talk about cost of exchange. You have to move, how do we determine the value of the Naira to the renminbi or the yuan, as the case may be, whatever you want to call the Chinese currency. Those challenges, and then that is just between Nigeria and China. You then have to repeat that entire dynamic, that entire cycle between South Africa and China. You have to repeat it between South Africa and Brazil. You have to repeat it between South Africa and Russia, South Africa and India. The potential complications, cost implications are just simply too wide and far-reaching to be overcome easily. And that's why, for me, it's obvious that the de-dollarization effort is good for the people that want it, and maybe it's even good for the global balance of power, in terms of financial flows and even economic power and all of that. But it's not something that is going to be easy to realize, simply because of all of these complexities and dynamics that are involved. So the risk to the United States economy is there, but it's a risk that is extremely unlikely to crystallize, at least definitely not in the medium, maybe not even in the near long term, if I may coin such an expression. So I think the United States can continue to work hard to make themselves competitive. They're sitting in a very comfortable position. It's going to be very difficult to dislodge them.
All right, quickly, what do you think will be the position of the World Trade Organization in this regard, for the BRICS trying to de-dollarize the global economy, coming up with different replacement or substitute for the dollar?
I mean, the WTO is one of those, in my opinion, neoliberal institutions that truly are serving the interest of the West. I put them in the same basket as the United Nations, put them in the same basket as the IMF and the World Bank. These are all supposedly international multilateral organizations that were set up to pursue the common interest of the global agenda, the global common good, if you like. But the truth and the reality is very different. The truth and the reality is that the bill for running those organizations, there's a cost implication, to having a huge World Trade Center building, to have thousands of staff that are stationed all over the world, there's a cost. The majority of that cost is borne largely by the United States and their Western allies, largely. Therefore, whatever their policy stance will be on any matter would always lean in the favor of the people that are paying their deal. So if you ask what the position of the WTO will be with regards to BRICS, and the push for the dollarization, the push for some sort of move away from the dollar as the reserve currency of the world, the trade currency and transaction facilitation currency of the world, they will be opposed to it, but they will not come out openly to say so. Because of course they are the World Trade Organization. They're supposed to be fostering global trade. Now, looking at it from a technical standpoint, I think that the WTO will probably also not be too favorably disposed to any proposal that would disrupt the smooth flow of financial transactions. Trade can only happen when there are payments. Payments are done in currencies. Any idea that pushes forward a disruption in a system that really works, let's be honest with ourselves, the global payment systems ecosystem, if you like, all of the platforms that have been developed, SWIFT, the Bank of International Settlement, all of these platforms and structures, they work. Global transactions are going on smoothly. Currencies, payments are being made. So why disrupt it? So the reason for disruption is political, and I think that the World Trade Organization will recognize this and may not necessarily be in support of this de-dollarization agenda. But there's nothing they can do about it. They don't really have a significant role to play when it comes to development of these payment systems and platforms, international platforms, and all of that. So I think they will simply be observing and hoping that the best would happen. In terms of trade policies, tariff policies, all of these things will not necessarily have any significant bearing. So I think they will sit back and just hope that the interest of their paymasters are best served by whatever outcome eventually emerges.
All right, let's wrap up with these. Will you support the advocacy for Nigeria to join the BRICS nations, as you know that this economic bloc is getting stronger and attracting more nations?
Well,
Quickly.
In fact, the interesting thing is that when BRICS came about not as a regional economic bloc. It was just simply an investment advisory thing from some of the global investment banks to say, look, these are the countries that would best serve you as an international investor. But over the years, it has emerged and evolved into now an actual economic grouping of countries. Now, Nigeria, there was BRICS, and then there was BRICS. So the idea evolved from Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa to include Brazil, Russia, India, Nigeria, China, Nigeria, and then South Africa. But unfortunately, because we don't have our act together economically, the attraction for those people to embrace the participation of Nigeria was not there. Does it benefit us? I think it's always good to have options, So I would say that we should take a stance, a look and see stance, where we're not necessarily saying we're not interested, but we're not being bullish about pushing for a membership, such that we can hedge our bets. Depending on how the game goes, we don't find ourselves, caught with the wrong end of the stick. So I would say we should maintain a mid-table stance and hedge our bets until we see how things will play out.
Many thanks, Segun Sopitan, for being on the show today. It's been wonderful having you.
Early exchange, shaping policy, advancing development.